And then it was just after like the lockdown COVID, I was like, actually, I want to be more in films and TV and do like a big production, and you're working on it for a substantial amount of time. And I started as a COVID marshal and on Indiana Jones.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then I got my first marshalling job. And then from there, I got a production assistant job on a Sony Marvel movie called Craven. And I met the producer while I was there, and I then became his assistant. So that was my first proper role in the industry as a producer's assistant. And then from there, went to do location coordinating.
Welcome to Filmmaking Framed, your video podcast uncovering the realities of filmmaking. I'm your host, Daniel Hughes.
And I'm your host, Tom Dexter.
With us today is Ashleigh Shuttleworth, location coordinator on projects such as 15 Love, Extraordinary Season 2. Great to have you with us, Ashleigh.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So please, can you define the role of a location coordinator?
I think it's quite a tricky one to fully describe. I think each job, your kind of role can change and manipulate depending on what the project is, especially if you're doing a TV or a film. But essentially, you're kind of making sure that the team is running smoothly, everyone is kind of connecting, and you're in charge of making sure all the payments are made. When you're booking locations, making sure the contracts have gone through, and making sure there's no kind of little hidden bits in contracts, because you get given your own contract and you work with other location specific contracts, and also making sure you're like booking crew in, and making sure their timesheets are being signed off, and basically being the person of locations that is making sure everything is going smoothly, because you've got all the other team busy doing their specific sort of stuff and their specific location, so they're not really thinking about what's going on elsewhere. So you're there to make sure that everything else is being covered.
So what does your kind of day-to-day look like?
It depends. During prep, it's a lot more kind of making sure that there's the paperwork is kind of ready to be going, and setting up your vendors if you know you're going to be working with certain kit companies, and or even if you know that you're going to be using certain location services and like scouting services, they're kind of already set up. You can get their contracts kind of through with legal to make sure that you're not getting a hiccup further down the line, because sometimes you might get a location they need to book it and it needs to be booked now. It can't be waited. And then if you've got to be going through legal back and forths, you want to get that done in prep. What else do you do? It's kind of making sure that all the tech recce's and directors recce's are all going ahead and on schedule. Some coordinators will book these in with the locations themselves, or others will have the location manager book it in, and you just put out a document for the recce schedule document and hand that out to production, who will divvy up to whoever's attending. And just kind of being in hand to help with anything. Like with when I worked with yourself, I was scouting because I was an extra pair of hands that was available, because at the beginning there's not ultimately lots and lots for you to do as a coordinator, and as you gear up to shooting, that's when you're getting loads of payments coming through. All the contracts are like back to back, and you are flat out with making sure everything is all documented properly and nothing gets missed. And I kind of see a coordinator as a bit of a kind of like a sieve, and you're there to catch all of the little bits that can go amiss when everything is going so fast and fast paced, and you're there to be like, oh, I've not actually seen any sort of booking form for the tech parking on Friday. Is this still happening? And kind of checking with the ALM, whoever is looking after that location, and being there just to make sure, kind of give the nudges to people that you think if there's something gone amiss.
So you're kind of in a conductor role, kind of working across the locations department, making sure that various plates not being dropped.
I think it's one role that you do really work with literally everybody in the team, because you get your hierarchy, you get your SLM and your location manager and your ALM.
SLM for people who don't know.
It's a supervising location manager. Some jobs don't have the supervising location manager, or they just have a location manager, then assistant location manager. But essentially, you get the supervising location manager who would talk to the location managers, who would talk to the ALMs, who would talk to the LAs, who would talk to the marshals, and it's quite
ALMs and LAs. Sorry,
location assistants and assistant location managers.
Great.
So they kind of, you wouldn't really see a location manager talking necessarily to the marshals, or the supervising location manager even talking to the assistant location managers that often, especially if you're a super spread out production and you're in multiple places across the UK. They don't have the time to be kind of doing all that checking in. So I, like myself, would be more kind of gelling with those teams and making sure that everything is going fine for them.
Awesome. And what are the other departments that you would work with most closely as a location coordinator?
Definitely art department.
Yep.
You trying to get their kind of get a gauge of what they're going to be doing with the locations. Obviously, you would have your assistant location managers and location managers kind of coaxing with the art department as to what they're intending to do to the locations, and if they're wanting to dig up the garden and throw paint everywhere. But I'll be making sure that there's a prep and strike schedule clearly defined for everyone to see, and they can see where we're at on each day. And so the supervising location manager can see, and it all adds up to money at the end of the day. So you can clearly see that there's 4 days of prep at one location, but at the same time, there might be 4 days of prep at a different location, which means we need more crew to oversee both those locations. So just making sure it's quite more like making it pretty and easily to view for everyone.
Yeah. And the locations team size definitely does kind of grow and shrink as art department prep periods, because obviously you need a member of the department to be there any day there's prep, any day there's shoot, any day there's strike.
Yeah.
What do you do to make those look pretty? Are you designing them on like
it's just on a spreadsheet and just lots of different colours. So you just have I usually use kind of like a green for prep, and then like a blue for shoot, and then like a red for strike. And so then you can see, as like a glance, you can look at it. You've got all the locations, the dates, and it goes normally like that in a quite a nice. But sometimes you've got one location that's got 2 weeks of prep. So then you know that you're going to lose a member of your team very clearly for 2 weeks just on one location, which can be quite hard for a team that is smaller, because like they're just kind of stuck at one location.
And there is a kind of challenge in scheduling where, on one hand, you want the same person to cover the prep shoot strike for a location. On the other hand, you might want a particular location manager or assistant location manager to be the set person. So they build relationships with the ADs, with production, with grips, with sparks, and so on. Or it may be that you have a location that is not particularly difficult or will be a very challenging shoot day. So you can kind of be torn between wanting to make it, okay, I want to give you a location, but on the other hand, I don't want to lose you for 2 weeks on a relatively easy prep when you're so strong on set. So it kind of...
I've seen it where the location manager or assistant location manager, if there's a really trusted marshal or a location assistant, but even a marshal that's a really experienced marshal, that they bring them on for the whole period, because you can just leave a marshal there and then they can dip in and out. So they're still supervising it, but they need to pop on to do a scour or a recce. They pop out and do that while this marshal or assistant.
Yeah, we've like that is used. I personally wouldn't recommend it. Just because there is, I think people don't actually see how much responsibility there is in the prep and strike side of things. Like, it does look like to the outside world that you've just got one person sat in a house just like twiddling their thumbs, but that's not what they should be doing while they're there. The whole point of them being there is to be checking in with whatever teams are prepping there, making sure that they're not doing anything that they haven't agreed to. So if you've got a marshal there, are they really going to understand what the prep and what their intentions were? And are they going to know they've not spoken through with the art department their intentions? So if you're giving them a document being like, this is it, kind of could be a bit like, oh, I don't know. And suddenly they're drilling holes into the walls that they weren't allowed to drill holes into. And then you can't really have a go at a marshal because they're just don't
Yeah.
know any better.
It's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah, and even just like it's quite hard for a marshal to go up if you've got the sparks in. They can, some of them are lovely, but some of them can be less. They just want to get in and they want to get out. And if you put a marshal and be like telling them to be like, be careful, don't do this, don't do that, they're just going to sometimes be like, no, like, I'm just going to carry on. Like they don't have that authority, and it's hard for them to really push the rules and make sure that they're not doing things they're not allowed to do.
Yeah, so often you're putting more authoritative members of your team there as a backstop to other departments cutting corners.
Yeah.
And it's can be frustrating from a scheduling standpoint because you're like, well, I don't want to lose you to just babysitting, quote unquote. But this is a location, it's a listed building, or you know, it's got small corridors or any number of features that make it more likely to be damageable will increase the threshold for how experienced a member of staff you'll have there supervising.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the location you've got. Like, there's such a wide range of scales of what locations you're at. Like, if you're at a manor house, stately home, it is so protected. You need to wrap it in bubble wrap. Like, you need to have someone that's experienced there just to know what is and isn't now. Just as a general rule, we have done it for so many years now that what. At every location, like every stately home has the same rules, but a marshal that hasn't done that many locations from a side of prep and strike, they've just more been on set and just been told what they're doing every day. To leave them on their own is quite intimidating. But if you've got a marshal that is stepping up, or we when we worked with Joa, one of our lovely location assistants, she was someone that we knew that we could trust. And so then you're like, okay, I can trust you. You've spoken through and you've had time to sit down with them and go through what the intentions were. And she built up a really good relationship with the location owners as well. So it kind of helps her with her career, and you can give that. It's good for helping people to step up.
Yeah.
But I think when you go as low as like marshals, it's going to be a little bit intimidating for them.
How early is a locations coordinator brought on as part of the whole team, and how involved are you in the scouting, the finding of locations, that sort of thing?
Generally, you're brought on before any ALMs are brought on. When I worked on jobs before, I've started at the same time as an SLM has started, or you're kind of more like 9 to 10 weeks before shoot. You are one of the first people to be in the team, and then once you join, the team gradually grows. So you are one of the longest people on the job as
Is it the SLM who hires you, or the production hires you direct?
Yeah,
so an
SLM
SLM picks who they want as a coordinator if you're available. Then
because that relationship between yourself and the SLM is so integral. You need to have that, like, a good working relationship with them. Some people, if you're going to clash with someone, it's just not going to work, because you are their like right hand man at the end of the day. Like, you're almost their assistant. Like, whatever they need you to do, you're doing and making sure it's organised. And if they ask you to send a recce schedule over to the director, you need to make sure that you've sent that recce schedule over to the director.
And in my experience, the coordinator is the person in the team that cares the most about the budget compared to yourself, next to yourself.
Yeah.
Because, for example, the unit manager is thinking, I need the base, I need to find trucks, I need to do power. And they're having conversations, they're considering the budget, but it's not as deep as the coordinator, who would be the one putting the purchase orders in, matching it up, going through the budget with you. So yeah, it's a very close relationship. Yeah.
And it's a lot of trust that you have in your coordinator, because you are like the budget for a supervising location manager is such a major part of their role, and making sure that they're not going over budget. And if they are, that being flagged to the exec producers or line producer or unit production manager, whoever you've got overseeing that, you need to have that very strong relationship with the coordinator to make sure that they're flagging that to the supervising location manager, to then let them know that we're going to need more money, or something's going to need to be cut, or whatever. That those conversations need to be happening with the grown-ups, essentially, quote unquote.
And as well as art, who are the other departments that you work closely with as a coordinator?
I see myself. I always like getting to know the best boy quite well, because you sometimes people don't really get to know them that much, and a lot of like they will book things without discussing it with without discussing it with the location department. So you can suddenly find out that they want 3 cranes, and you're like, what, where? And we haven't got a hoarding license, so no. But if you've got that relationship with them, then they're kind of just over a text or a call being like, oh, by the way, there's talks of us wanting to get this crane in for this location. Is that going to be okay? Before they start going to production and getting like them getting quotes and booking it in, because you can say straight away, no, that's not going to be possible. There's a weight limit around the building or whatever the reason would be.
Interesting. What about legal and accounts?
Yes, legal and accounts. That's like your like right hand man as a coordinator. You need to have a very good relationship with the lead accountant, because there's a lot of times that you have like things that come in and they need to be paid within an hour, and it's like, please. And then this never goes down very well if you've got an accountant that you've not got to know, because they're just like, no, we can't do it, and they can most of the time, but you do need to have that relationship with them and be like, 99% of the time this isn't going to be the case. We do try and let you know, and that's why we have our PO system. So they are forecasting how much we're going to be spending that week, and so they know how much is going to be coming out and what's their workload is essentially. But having that relationship with the accountant is really, really strong. And then with legal, they're kind of like someone that you never meet. They're just an email. But you have a lot of contracts that will need amending to fit whatever production you're on's kind of rules. So yeah, you kind of speak with them, but you never really. I don't think I've ever spoken to one on the phone. It's always just you just got this email, legal advice essentially.
And are some of these big US studios are they based in America, or have they got a team
Yeah, I
over
think
here?
it depends. It depends on the production, because some will have they'll have a London based, like they'll have a London based legal team, or they'll have a US. It depends on what the contracts have been made up, really.
And are you usually based in the production office, and that's why you're you're close by to
Yeah.
the production team and
Yeah.
the production accountants and
Yeah, so I always like to be in the office, especially during prep, because you're with everybody then, and if you need something, it's so much better to have a personal relationship with everybody, and they know you as a face rather than someone on the phone or someone on an email. And you could just go over, if you need something from them, you need something from art department or you need something from production, you can just literally walk to their desk and be like, can this be done? Can we have that, etc. And it's then you get to know everyone a little bit better, and it's all part of that kind of the job role as coordinating. It helps you coordinate everything, and you know what's going on everywhere, because you're there to see it all and everything. If something happens, you know straight away. You're not getting told down the line, and then it'd be my job to pass that information on to my team.
who are out in the field and aren't in
Yeah,
the
because
office.
they
Yeah.
like it's so. If you're an assistant location manager or a location manager, like you don't really spend that much time in the office. Like you are out on the location because you need to be there on the ground, making sure that that's okay. So you're not going to know what's happening in the office. Like you need to be told that information, and that's why you have someone in the office. But saying that, as a coordinator, I do like to go on to set or be down with the team when we go in to shoot, just because again everyone is out and you're not with them. And if you're back at the office, everyone that you need to know information from essentially is going to be on set. So if you're with the production team or in the unit base, it's better to be with them, because you can just jump out and get things done from that way.
Makes sense.
Mm.
And let's talk about your entry into the industry. When did you know you wanted to get into it? What was your first role?
I kind of got in a little bit strangely. I did live events and television at university, but I only did that because I just got recommended. Someone, like a lecturer, just said, "Oh, actually, I think you'd really enjoy doing live events and television." And I just thought, "Yeah, sounds all right, doesn't it?" The course I didn't learn very much from, but it did get me to meet people in the industry, which was very handy. And I started in reality TV as my first job, and then I went into more commercial based stuff. And then it was just after like the lockdown COVID, I was like, actually, I want to be more in films and TV and do like a big production, and you're working on it for a substantial amount of time. And I started as a COVID marshal and on Indiana Jones.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then I got my first marshalling job. Um, and then from there, I got a production assistant job on a Sony Marvel movie called Craven. And I met the producer while I was there, and I then became his assistant. So that was my first proper role in the industry as a producer's assistant. And then from there, went to do location coordinating.
And I kind of want to take it back in two parts. First, how does reality TV differ from kind of commercial TV?
It's very different. So with reality TV, it's all a lot more run and gun style filming. It's kind of you rock up, you're filming interactions that are semi-organic, kind of. They're produced, but they're not scripted. And there's no retakes. Essentially, it's not. You don't really build a set. It's kind of in a home, on a street, in a restaurant, or you'd have like a fixed rigged house. So it's got like a Big Brother or your Love Islands. They're all. It's more just filming what's happening. There's not as much of a. There's no real locations team that much in reality TV. You kind of get a researcher that's doing it, or the producer directors in it will find the locations that are going to go out and film in. And it's a little bit more just fast paced. Everything's very quickly done. Whereas in films and in high end TV, it's obviously scripted. It's very structured. There's a lot of time that goes into the building of these sets and the look of these sets, dressing them and finding the locations like ourselves that are going out and scouting for them some locations can take months to find because there's such a specific look that the director wants. And that's not, I think, as important on a reality show.
Makes sense. And then you getting that role as a producer's assistant, because we've had a fantastic producer's assistant, Ben Wengene, on, and it's for many seen as a pathway to going into becoming a producer. So could you talk about how you built that relationship? And
I met the producer I worked with just from being in the office and just helping him out because he was American. He'd come over to the UK, so I was like, if you need anything, just generally helping him out, suggesting where to go in London, etc. And then you just become essentially get like a right hand man, like a coordinator is. You're someone's support. So anything that they need doing, if they need flights booking, if they need information from a different department, so they might be like, I need all the looks that costume I've currently got together for such and such character. And so then you would go and speak to the costume team and make sure that they are sending that information over to me and the producer. The same way, if they've got a specific prop for the film that they want to know where they're at with the design, and they want to see a few different versions. So you're going to get that information and pass that on. And you're kind of, it is like an executive assistant sort of role where it's both personal and like work related kind of things you need to do for them.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good job. I think if you do a job as a producer's assistant, especially coming into the industry, it can be super intimidating to be working with very established crew members that are like a very established set designer or the DOP and it's
DOP,
director of photography, and even the director in some cases. It can be quite intimidating. So when you get a job with a producer's assistant, you almost get given a sort of, you're allowed to go and talk to whoever you want, and you don't feel like you shouldn't be talking to them. Because I think when you come on as a marshal or as a floor runner or anything like that, which is generally your first jobs in the industry, it's like, oh God, you're kind of told don't approach them, don't do this, don't do that, stay away. And then when you get the job as a producer's assistant, it's like, well, no, you go straight to the top person. The producer wants the information from the horse's mouth as such. Like he doesn't want me going to their assistants to get the information. They want it directly.
And so what made you decide to go then towards location coordinating rather than carrying on down that producer's assistant route?
I just always wanted to go into locations. I think when I first did some marshalling, I just had such a good time. I remember a few years ago, it was in the January time and I hadn't worked for like a couple of weeks, and I'd got a job on Luther, and I was like, do you know, I think I prefer working to being off, which is insane. But I used to have such a good time. In general, the locations team, we do try and make it fun at work, and we get the longest hours, and it can be very tiresome, and it can be laboursome. There's lots of carrying things and changing bins and all that jazz. But normally you've got a very good team, and you can have a laugh while you're doing it, and you don't have to be on set all the time. You can go off and come back, and you're not just defined to one area. So I just enjoy it more. I like the freedom of moving around and working with all the different departments.
Awesome. And I believe you've actually filmed abroad.
Yes, I filmed abroad on a few jobs. I filmed in Tenerife, and I filmed in Ibiza and Kuwait.
And how is that filming abroad compared to filming in the UK?
It's just when you've got language barriers, it can be quite difficult. But it is a lot of fun when you do an away job, because you've got your whole crew, you're all going away, you're staying in a hotel, you kind of get a false sense of you're on holiday and you're not. But it can be quite challenging with a language barrier, or just simply you just don't know the ground like you do in the UK. If you need something and something breaks, I can call up the location services here being like, I need 4 of these. When you're going to a country that doesn't have quite the facilities that the UK has, you can't get this equipment in 45 minutes. It needs to be shipped in. So it has its challenges, but it's good fun.
Did you hire locals on those jobs?
Half and half usually. It depends on the size of the production. Generally, all of the ones I did, it was just all English crew that went over, and then you'd have if the location would have a fixer. So when I did some filming over in Doha, and they had a producer that was already there that was kind of like the fixer, and then was producing, and then I was just there with him. Oh, sorry.
And if you were going to advise a young person that wanted to get into the industry, what would you tell them? How would you tell them to get their first job?
I think the best way to get a job is to have a look at sort of screen skills and trying to see whether you can get any help from them. We've worked a few times with they're like screen skills. Are they trainees? And they've all the ones I know have done very well, and that is been super helpful for them to get their first job in the industry. And as well, there's like Call Time, who are very good. Diary Service, I was with them when I first started, and it gives you opportunities, which is that's the hardest part of when you're starting out is the opportunities. There's so many people wanting to get in the industry and not enough jobs. And when you've got one job going advertising, it's like hundreds of people applying for it. Whereas if you get on with a Diary Service, you say you want to do that job, they submit those CVs who they think would be suitable for that job, and that's the relationship you have as a hirer, that they're going to be giving you people that they know are going to be okay for the job. And also, if they've got someone that hasn't been on set before, what are the jobs that they would be tailored for? But also, like, going onto Facebook groups is probably the best way to get work.
Any groups in particular you want to highlight?
As if you want to do like runner groups, there's a bit of People available on TV Runners, I believe it's called. That's really good. That's where, especially when I worked in TV, like reality TV, I got a lot of my jobs from that website. And just when you're applying, just make it very clear and simple in your email. We don't like, if I'm putting out a job advert, I'm going to be getting hundreds of emails. You're going to choose the one that's simple, easy to read. You want to look at their CV and see what jobs they've done. And if you haven't worked in the industry before, kind of just highlight things. If you've done like customer service or front of house stuff, being like you're sociable, you work well with the team, like those sort of key things that you, and as a junior in the industry, is the key thing, is almost like being sociable and being able to talk to people and get information across, and kind of being you're on the ground as such, so you need to be able to just get in and get running essentially.
Are you able to give some tips on what you're looking for when you're looking at a CV? What does it say at the top? What's useful information? How should they structure it to explain what jobs they've been on?
I like it to be, you just have your name, where you're located, if you drive, and if you've got a car, because that's always handy, because a lot of people drive but they don't have a car. And then if you've got experience in the industry, to have the job you're on, what if it was a studio job or if it was a kind of independent or a channel job. So if it was like a Sony feature film, or when we did like Disney Plus or kind of that side. And then what your role was, and then who you worked with. So who you were directly working with, who was your kind of manager and who was their manager's manager. Because when I'm hiring someone, if I've seen that they've worked on X job and I've seen that they've worked with two people I know, the first thing I'm going to do is call them up and be like, so what's this person like? And they'll be like, oh yeah, he's great. And that's automatically, that's the reference is kind of done. He's hired.
So if you're a marshal and you've done a few marshal jobs, are you listing your location assistant you worked under, or the ALM or the LM?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah. Especially if you like, I wouldn't put, if you were on a job and you never even saw the location manager, then I wouldn't.
Because you know you're not going to get a personal reference.
Well, yeah, because you didn't actually physically work with them.
And one thing I'd highlight is, don't put on your CV, as a marshal, I set up easy ups, I talk to the public, I help. It's like, I know what a marshal does. Like, if you've marshaled for X weeks, I know you have done those things. All you're doing is clogging up your CV.
Yeah. And also, one thing that it sometimes can be a bit of a pet peeve for locations members is if you've not tailored your CV for applying for locations jobs. And I think that'll be the case in general if you're applying for any sort of department, is do spend the time and tailor your CV for that department. Because if you've got on your CV being like, I'm really keen to be a production designer and I've been working on small films as this, like, I don't need to know that, because I'm looking for you to be hiring as one of my locations team. I need to know that you're going to be okay with working with the public, and you're going to be okay working with my team, and you're going to be able to like go and set up a crowd space. I don't need to know that you want to be a production designer, or you want to be a camera operator or a director.
Yeah, putting that you've directed your own shorts means nothing if I'm hiring you as a marshal.
No, exactly. And that's why it's like, obviously that's great information. And when you're on set, chat about it with the team you're working around, be like, oh, actually, I'm really wanting to get into the art department. And the person you're working with is being like, well, actually, I'm good friends with the art department on this team. They might be looking for assistants. I can put your name forward. Because at the end of the day, a marshal usually is only on for the days that you've hired them for. But I wouldn't put it on your CV, because you would then have someone else that's tailored their CV to being all about wanting to be in locations. And you're obviously going to choose the person that really wants to be in locations.
And as a coordinator, often you're the person hiring the marshals. Yeah. So what's the kind of things that a marshal can do once they've gotten on a role with you to help encourage you to bring them back?
I think don't ever call on a Sunday or a Saturday or in the evenings. Just if you call, if you leave a message, fine. Don't call again and then again, because honestly, it can be the most infuriating thing. Always just like email with your CV saying when you're available, and I will then reply and say whether you are available now, or just if I say to you, but check in a couple of weeks because things can change. Then check in a couple of weeks because things could have changed. Don't then just not ever email me again. As a coordinator, you are pulled in so many different directions. So you need to be very good at delegating your time to certain jobs. So when you are sitting down and you need 5 marshals. I want to be able to go and find the 5 marshal CVs that I've filed away and put a star next to. Like, I need it to be quick. I need to give them a call, and I'll have a note saying that they were available. When I spoke to them, they were available until these dates, and I can just give them a call and be like, are you still available?
Yeah, my first job, I was working in Wales, and I had just found one of these location Facebook groups, and they had said, we're looking for marshals to work on this job. And so I posted on the thing saying, yep, me, this is my contact information. And then I didn't hear anything for a month.
Yeah.
And they obviously had hired some marshals. Those marshals either weren't very good or moved on or whatever it was. And then they just messaged me out of the blue. They said, because they just went through that same list of people who'd posted on that first post and said, are you free?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes.
It is you just got to look at it as in a way that if you're really busy and you need something done, what can you do to make yourself the easiest hire? And so make it very clear on your CV, your contact information. And if you can have it where you click on your number and it calls your number, because you're going to be, most of the time you're looking at them on your phone. You like just making things simple and not pestering, because that's when it can get annoying. And I do think it's best to always go via email when you are looking for work, and not unless you know the person or you've been referred to them. Like, say, I know that you're queuing up a job and I know a marshal. I'd be like, oh, I would probably have messaged Dan in before saying, I know a really good marshal. I've given him your number. He's going to reach out. And then he could then message you on WhatsApp. But in general, I would say go on email and just make it just a nice, clean, simple email with your CV.
Can I ask your thoughts on the whole driving thing? I know that's a thing that a lot of new entrants or teenagers, recent graduates are trying to decide, should they have a license, and is it important that they drive? What are your thoughts on that?
In locations team, definitely, because you aren't always in London and you're not always near a train station, and you're sometimes, and a lot of the time, especially on bigger jobs, you're in the middle of nowhere in a field in an easy up. Like, it's you need to be able to get to these locations, and ridiculously early hours. If I've booked 5 marshals and then I'm like, I'll give you out the call times whenever we don't get them until the day before anyway. And I send out the call time being like, you need to be there for 6 a.m. And then they message back being like, well, I can't get there for 6 a.m. because I don't drive. And it's like, well, I don't really know what to say in that case, because I don't know how you're going to get to work. But you then need to find arrangements for getting there and getting a lift if you know one of the other marshals. Like, I've before had lifts when my car's broken down. But I think it is very crucial to drive in the locations team.
And there are times when you're filming in London when it doesn't, the person doesn't need to be able to drive in order to get there. But if you know you're on a shoot when you're going to have some locations in London and some out on the road, ideally locations teams like to have repeat marshals, because they build a relationship with the LAs, and then you can trust them and you can assign various tasks. And so it will disadvantage you even on being hired on days when a car is not required, because it means that if they're like, well, on the road wouldn't need to get a new marshal, so I might as well get someone who I can build a relationship with for the duration.
Yeah, and when I first started out, I was told get a car when I first moved into go, because I never used to have a car until I moved into the film and high-end TV world. I just used to get around on public transport like everyone else really in London. But that was the first thing that I was told to get a car, because you aren't in central London all the time. It's so expensive to film in central London. So if a production can avoid it, they will. So you might have on a whole job 4 or 5 days where you're in central London, but the rest of it you're going to be on the outskirts. And you're going to be getting there for times when public transport isn't available, or you're finishing at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we do night shoots. It's such a ever changing job. Every day is completely different, and your times change all the time. You need to know that you're going to be able to get from A to B whenever you need to get there, and you're not restricted to any last train or anything like that. And as well, like when you do move up, you then start to get car allowance, which when you start using your car for work and you need to use it for scouting or you need to use it to carry some kit around, you then will get paid to have that car there.
And you get all your fuel reimbursed.
And you get, which is great.
I'll just say to anyone listening who isn't aware, you do need to have business car insurance.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're carrying any kit, and you can't carry people. You have to have a special license.
Something.
Yeah, you basically need to be a taxi driver.
Or
a unit driver.
It's not a new entrant, but there is a pressure that is placed on location managers to drive around the director when you're on recce's, and often you'll do it because it allows you to have a one-on-one conversation with them in a way that if the driver was there, it would kind of inhibit that. But you do need to be very careful because you're not insured to be transport, and you can drive them around the same way that you can drive. If you're going to work with a colleague or something, it's not saying you can't have people in your car, but it's that it can't be. You are not insured on a business perspective, and if something goes wrong, as in there's a crash, you can run into some real problems.
Yeah, it's something to be, especially when you're a marshal or an LA, it's quite hard to say no when you're told, can you go and drive this person around? But you do need to be careful and think about yourself. And most of the time, if you just say to your location manager, being like, I'm not really comfortable driving them around because, it is ultimately, if you've got someone that's quite high up in your car, you're going to be nervous. And that means you're probably not going to be driving quite as well as you normally are driving. So it's just best to they can just get a unit driver in if they need someone to drive them around. But it is so, like you said, it is so common that you drive the director around. I remember I drove a director around. But it's different jobs ask different things, don't they?
I'll just add as well, you need business insurance just for driving to multiple locations.
Yeah.
So usually if you get your standard car insurance, it only covers you to get to one single place of work. And you actually need business insurance if you're going to be moving around different locations.
Is that during the day? If you're just moving during the day, or if you're going to...
If you were working in a production office and it was a permanent place and you only ever went to the production office, you probably, and I'm not a professional car insurer, but you probably can just have that basic one. But you need business insurance if your unit base is moving around.
I think it's best just to get business insurance added anyway. It doesn't cost that much more. Mine didn't change really at all to add, and even if it's like only 2,000 miles of business insurance, especially when you're starting out, because you're not really going to be driving around that easily. But when you do need to submit expenses to the production office, even if you happen to be like your location manager you're working with is like, can you run to Screwfix and get some cable ties? And that you're like, yeah, sure, and they give you a card and you go off in your car, you can then claim that fuel back. But if you've not got business insurance, the company is not going to pay that back to you.
I'm also going to add, there's another little lesson I learned when I was starting out. You also need business breakdown cover. So if you're with the AA or RAC and you have breakdown cover for your car, unless you have business cover, you actually aren't covered to break down if you break down while working.
How would you know?
But they would tell when you break down, they ask, they go, have you got business insurance or normal insurance? And they'll look at your insurance document. And your insurance document will say business, and they'll say, well, you're not covered then. Even if you broke down when you weren't in business operations, it has.
I've not had a problem.
Maybe I just got unlucky then. But they basically went, do you have business insurance? Yes, and they're like, well, you need business breakdown cover.
Oh, who knew? Well, there you go.
There you are. A little bit of
I'll be researching
every day's a school day.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be really nervous when I'm driving around at work, being like, oh, please don't break down.
I was fortunate because I didn't break down. On that example, I'd lost my car key, my spare car key, and I tried to claim on my car, my breakdown cover, which had key cover, and you had to have business cover, so it was invalidated.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
What are the qualities, in your experience, that make someone particularly good at the locations department relative to just they want to work in film?
Being a very can-do willing to do kind of anything person, and not being shy about picking up heavy things, or just basically someone that gets on with it, doesn't faff around, and is just quite direct. Like if you got someone that I go and say, can you bring 2 easy ups over here and set them up? And they go and they get it done. I'm like, great. If I've got someone that I'm saying, can you go grab 2 easy ups and set them up? And they're like, yeah. I'm just going to go and grab a coffee first. Or like, I'm just, and you're like, you want to be someone that's really, you just being keen. And I think that might be the case of every department, but having a set of marshals that are really, really keen, and also being excited to be there, and like bringing sort of like a positive attitude to the team, because a lot of our team of, especially when it gets to the later weeks of filming, are knackered. Like we are tired, and we can do with having some chipper, happy people around us to bring a bit of like joy to the team. And so if you come in on the Thursday morning and you're like, hey, and then you're like, yeah, and gets fully stuck in and just helping out, going and asking the other members of the team, like, do you need anything? Do you want a cup of tea? Do you want a coffee? Kind of being those sort of people, it really does make a difference, because you remember that person then being like, oh, like they were just lovely. And having people that are nice people on set is good to have. I don't want people that are going to be like moody or just like roll their eyes when they've got to set up a 50 table crowd setup. Like you want someone that's going to be like, yeah, absolutely.
And to an extent, if you have someone who's absolutely excellent at the job but a pain to be around and you don't enjoy their company, and someone who's really good at a job but not necessarily excellent but is really good to enjoyable to work with, you're probably going to go for them.
Yeah, which I don't know whether you're allowed to be like that in terms of like legally.
Yeah, well, you're hiring freelancers, so it's just who you pick to hire. It's not, you can't fire someone for not being fun to work with,
but I don't think you can't penalise people for, like, you can't not hire someone because of, isn't that in one of the
I don't think personality is a protected class.
Yeah, I think it's just race, gender.
You know, whenever we start a job and they go through, and you have to go through all the
because particularly when you're in a public facing role, being someone who gets on well with the public, like it's because it's I might be talking complete rubbish here, I will go check this, but it's something about how they conduct themselves, not something how they are. So gender, race, age, those are things that you can't.
Want someone that's friendly, and not, if they've got a member of the public that's going to start kicking off, you want someone that's going to calm the situation, not escalate the situation.
I'm talking someone like who's absolutely excellent and someone who's really good. I'm not talking someone who's unqualified but fun to be around. It would have to both be similar, but you're going to go for
I would definitely go for the one that I like to be around. And if I'm choosing who my so when I do like assistant location managing as well, if I'm choosing my location assistant, I'm going to go with the one that I get on with, because you're going to be spending so much time with that person, and you want to be able to have a good, like, we work because we enjoy this job. Like, it is the industry as a whole it is fun, but we work such long hours, and we sacrifice so much of our lives to do this career. You want to be around people that you're going to enjoy being around. And so if you're like an upbeat, happy, you're coming in every day, like just being a bit more smiley, and like just making it just a little bit better than when you're setting up a load of easy ups and it's torrential rain. You want someone that's going to be laughing about the fact that we're setting up these easy ups in the torrential rain, not someone that's just like, oh, this, like, that's just going to bring everyone down.
Yeah, particularly because when you're a junior, you don't have a tremendous amount of technical skills to boost the department. But if you can raise the morale of the people who have technical skills, that is very valuable to your team.
Yeah, exactly. It's super valuable. If you've got a happy team, everything's so much better. People communicating better. People are like, jobs are done quicker because they just get like people getting on with it. They're not just sat and being like, oh, I don't want to be here. It makes such a huge difference when you've got a team that actually all gels. Like, I've seen teams before where they have like clashing, and it just causes rifts in the team, and it can be really hard to manage. And especially as like a supervisor and location manager, you're like, I don't want to be dealing with this. You just need to get on. We're here to do a job. And I feel like people that do start to cause problems, it doesn't do very good for their career, because they get known for that sort of behaviour.
Could you talk a bit about what are the personality traits that make a good location coordinator specifically?
You need to be organized, and you need to be you need to be able to be good with like reading through contracts, and you need to be you need to be a fast-paced individual, I'd say. um you need to be able to just delegate what time you have throughout the day, and you just kind of knock through all the things that you have to do. If you can't really, you don't have time to kind of faff around and divert because you just won't ever get anything done. um so definitely someone that is very good with spreadsheets. You need to love spreadsheets. If you like Excel or numbers for Mac, then you'd be okay. But if you're not a paperwork person, you don't like doing all of that, then it's definitely not a job for you. There's so many different spreadsheets that you have to build just to make sure it's for your own real self, to make sure that you know where everything is, and it's keeping yourself on track essentially, but also shows if production want to see where we're at with a certain legal document, or what they want to see where we're at with a PO, or anything really, they can see on the spreadsheet that, well, we're waiting for this to happen, or we're waiting for that. So yeah, definitely need to love a spreadsheet.
And you developed a lot of those skills through your work in live ops and reality TV, and then also the producer's assistant, like you say. Where would people usually get their skills? What tier is it? Is it similar to being an assistant location manager? Do assistant location, like you say, you've done both. If someone was trying to get into coordinating, how would they?
Because you must know for both of yourselves, like, no one ever gave me any training. No one ever sat me down and was like, so this is what you do as a location coordinator, or this is what you do. I remember one of my friends who, she's a location coordinator, and I had an interview my first interview for a location coordinator job, and I called her up. I was like, what do they do? Like, what do I need to say to them that I'm good at to get the job? And yeah, there's no training. You need to be someone that is able to figure it out yourself. The industry is in a whole is someone that figures it out themselves.
What did she tell you on the phone call?
She said that it's basically the spreadsheets. She just said like lots and lots of spreadsheets, and I was like, okay, because I didn't really know at the time a lot about locations from the behind the curtains of not being on a marshal on the floor. So I don't think as a marshal you realise how much paperwork there is to all these hires. And if you're filming on a road and you can have like 13, 14 location agreements, because you've got to pay off every single house because you're closing down the road and you need to use their driveways because there's nowhere else to put your cars, or you're going to be dressing the road with like period cars or whatever. You've got so much paperwork. But yeah, definitely that's all she said, was like, you just need to be very good at Excel. I think that's if you need to get your Excel knowledge up to.
There's a really useful tip there for marshals and location assistants, anyone in the department really, that if you can be really disciplined with your payment paperwork,
yes,
as well as managing receipts and all that stuff, but just something as a marshal as basic as putting in your timesheets as instructed on time
at
will
the
make
end of
your
the day,
job so much
send
easier.
your times in. Yes, please.
Because sometimes
Because it's
people
so
leave it
annoying.
for weeks and then they're trying to catch up, and you're like,
Yeah,
well, I
or
don't know what happened 3 weeks ago.
It's expenses as well. Like, once you finish the job, just get your expenses in, because when you've submitted your expenses, say it's car, like you did do some driving, you had to go out and pick something up, and then it's 4 or 5 weeks later. One, we might have finished the job by then, so the approval process would normally go through the supervising location manager or the location manager, and they'll be like, what was this for? Like, I can't remember what we were doing 5 weeks ago and what the reason was for this person doing that. So it's just getting it done quickly and submitting your timesheets when they need to be submitted, because it's only you that as a marshal that's going to be penalised for that, because it can delay your payment. And if you don't sign your timesheets and get them in by the 11 a.m. on Monday morning, like it usually is, then you won't get paid for another week.
But also, if you are causing particular problems, it can affect whether you're hired in the future. Because you're like, oh, Joe Boggs was amazing on set, but his paperwork was a mess, and it's just so much more faff that I would rather hire this other.
Yeah,
marshal.
and it's also like, if you if you're asking them to do certain things and fill in certain forms because you want just to get them onboarded, or you just kind of want to be like, cool, they're all sorted. If they're not doing it, it just leaves me in like on my spreadsheet amber coloured, and you're just like, I just want everything to be green. You want to be just getting through everything. And also when you're asked, like if you're a marshal and I'm calling you for something, or I'm messaging you about something, being quite like, especially if you're working, being quite quick to respond to those messages. And if you can't talk, just say, we'll call you back soon. You need to be quite good with the communication, especially when you're on the job.
In communicating, when, for example, you send out saying, okay, your call time is this tomorrow. Yeah,
Put a
great.
thumbs up, yes.
Or thumbs up, yeah, I'll be there. Just something so you can go, great, that's done. I know that process.
That's Daniel's favourite one, is he would send out all the call times to everyone, and you all do a different emoji every time.
I mean, I don't want the different emoji, but just convey that you like, not even a response, but that you have seen it, that you understand it. So I don't need to follow up and go, do you know you're starting at 4 a.m.?
Yeah. Or I've had it before where I've sent a call time to a marshal, and this is a key thing for any marshal looking to join the industry. If you're told a call time by your location manager or your coordinator, that is your call time. If you get given a call sheet or sent out by production, the call time on the call sheet is not your call time. You come in for the time you're told by the member of team that hired you, because that's messed up a couple of marshals in the past where they've come in at call time and we've needed them in 2 hours before.
And also it can be that you're being called after main call time because you're not needed, because they're starting inside a house or whatever, but you know there's going to be a huge strike at the end of the day.
Yeah, so you've got a staggered start. So always just go. And if you're unsure, message and just ask, just double checking that it's not changed for tomorrow. And it takes 2 seconds for me to reply, yeah, that's fine. Just don't call me at 10 o'clock at night and check, because I need my sleep.
Can they also check with the location assistant? Like, how does it cross over with you?
It depends if you've been on the job for a couple of weeks, and like we were saying earlier, that if you're most of the time we want to keep the same marshals on for the whole job. But if they haven't, then they're not going to know the location assistant. But generally, if I've told you what time it is, or the location manager's told you what time you come in for, whatever anyone else says, don't listen to them. Only go with what you've been told by the person who has hired you, or the person who is like doing your times, essentially.
Because they're sat there coordinating it all.
Because I've got a reason, or like I would have discussed with my location manager the reason that we're going to be calling them in for this time, and then they're going to be finishing early, and so if you've got marshals all talking together, being like, well, I've been told to come in for 7, and the other ones are, I've been coming for 9. Like, I'll just come in for 7 as well. And you're like, well, no, that's
because it could be broken turnaround, which is where you have to have 11 hours gap between when you finish
things.
And
there's loads of like logistics in why your times are different to other people, and it could be to do with what's happening the day after, because we might need them in super early the next day, so we're going to finish them earlier than the other crew, so we'll just get them in early that day. So there's like all the cogs that they might not be seeing, so just always follow what you're being told by the location manager.
And this goes to the advantage of being able to drive, because you're like, oh, it's great, I'll go with my friend who's also on the job. It's like, cool, but I might need you guys in at different times.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's fine, I'll just do his hours. And it's like, great, and now you're there for 16 hours and you haven't gone to sleep and you're not rested. And
a lot, don't you?
and you won't have authorized overtime. You're not going to be working safely. There's so many things.
Yeah, and it's just because it's unfair on the person that does drive at the end of the day, because at the beginning of the job they're like, oh yeah, you live down the road for me, that's fine, you can get a lift. And then if we've been like, oh, like, do you know, there's not actually that much left to do, why don't you go get an early finish so you can get a bit more rest, because we've been working so hard for the last few weeks. And they're like, oh, amazing. And then they're like, oh, wait, my mate isn't finishing for another 2 hours, and is he going to sit in his car for 2 hours? So that it's not fair, because you're given like these early offs and being able to get home because you deserve to have that time. When if you've got someone else relying on you, it can become quite difficult.
I would say to anyone listening to this, if they are feeling a bit despondent because they can't drive or they can't afford to learn to drive, I have worked with people in locations who don't,
Yeah.
and you can make it work. You just are limiting yourself a bit.
Just apply for the right jobs. Just don't say that you can do these things and then it's infuriating for anyone that's hiring you, because it's like if I'm hiring a marshal and I'm like, they've been like, yeah, I can go anywhere. And then I'm like, cool, you're going to be in Oxford on Tuesday and I need you there for 6 a.m. And they're like, oh, I can't get to Oxford. And then I'm like, well, like, I need to know that information before. Yeah. If I call you up being like, are you available? Be like, yeah, I'm available, but I don't drive. So it needs to be, if you've got London locations that I can get to via public transport, then amazing. And then if I know these sets are coming up, I can just put their names against those days.
Yeah. So it's not impossible. It just makes it
definitely not
harder,
impossible, but just definitely be kind of like open about the fact that you don't drive and make it known, and don't let people assume that you do drive, because it can end up biting you in the arse, as they say.
Yeah, and I've known people who get regular work in locations and they don't drive, but they've been saying that they're about to learn for the last 3.5 years, but they have not been stepped up, because when you get to location assistant grade, you're then going to need a car. And in the past, I have hired members of my permanent team who did not drive, and it caused me no end of problems relative to if I'd just been able to be like, hey, go here. And because there was one guy who was like, it took him 3 hours to get to a location because he was taking trains, and it would have been an hour and 20-minute drive.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's wear and tear on his body both ways.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm happy to do it. And it's like, cool, but now you're more exhausted in what is already an exhausting job. So I wouldn't.
Hours are so long. You don't. When you've done a 14-hour day, you just want to be in your car and getting home and going to bed, not going and trying to, and the train's being cancelled and you're then stranded and you're getting on a bus and you're getting home 3 hours later to then get up 4 hours later to go back to work again. It's very hard in this industry to not have a car.
What's the best thing about working in this industry?
I think it's the kind of the friends and the connections you meet. You're constantly meeting new people every day. It's like you don't need to go out anymore because your social battery is so used with work. And I just love the creativity and you work with some amazing and intelligent and creative people, and seeing like it's never not magical when you walk onto like a massive set and it's a build of either it's like a house or a street, and it can be incredible, and you kind of think, wow, like this is insane. And it's every day you're doing something different. If you're someone that likes to not do repetitive and doesn't basically isn't someone that's super structured, it's a fantastic industry for you because you change job every 6 months. Like you never get bored of work because you're doing something different, and you can change from what type of project you're on. Like we did a comedy TV series, which is all really funny and gaggy. And then when I then went and did a crime drama, which was all kind of like gloomy and grey, and you're changing up what you're looking for if you're going out scouting, and it just every day then becomes a different task, and nothing ever gets monotonous. Really, you're always faced with new challenges that you never thought you'd ever think would be an issue, and you're like, why? Like you have to kind of think to yourself, there's actually no way that I would have ever known that unless I'd ever come across this problem before. Because you get some problems where you're like, what?
And you get to see some amazing places as well. You
Yeah,
get to go
that's
around
the
London,
coolest
around the
thing.
country. You go to inside places that are totally private,
yeah.
unless you're on a film set and they've hired it.
Or when you go scouting and you're like even just going into loads of people's houses.
You can see some really cool houses.
Yeah, like insane, and they've got pools, like people's humongous places, and it's amazing. And you're like, all you got to do is we just knock on the door, being like, "Hey, we're looking for some filming locations," and people are like, "Yeah, come on in." You're like, brilliant.
And that kind of hits a point that we had in an early recording of, it's amazing how friendly people are and how much they're willing, because literally I've been at ones where I knock on the door and I have no proof of identity because you're freelancer, so you don't work for the BBC or for Disney or whatever, you're just hired for that project. So you've got no proof that you are who you say you are. And people are like, oh yeah, cool, wander around. And I've wandered around. There's been jewellery out and iPads and people
it's
just
crazy. They just trust you. You
Yeah.
say you work in film, and they're like, come on in.
And so it's that kind of when you're going for jobs and you're like, oh, I don't want people, because people have a tendency almost to assume that the world will be more negative to you cold approaching them. So reaching out for a job and being like, well, I don't want to pester them. And it's like, no, both the public when you're a scout and the industry when you're calling and you're like, hey, I'm really keen. I want to get a job. I've committed a film degree, or I'm just out of college. On the whole, the response you get is really surprisingly positive.
Yeah, it is. Like it is weird. As soon as you mention filming, people, it is because a lot of people don't understand the industry. So they're like, oh wow, like this is really cool. Or my house is going to be on a TV show, and even if you don't use them, they're just like quite excited about the fact that you've gone in to have a look at their house.
Yeah.
And even you get to go to like the manor houses and just like some insanely cool locations that sometimes aren't even available to the members of the public to go to, and you're getting a guided tour on your own around, and it's like lovely. And you meet some really cool people as well from that side of scouting. Like you're meeting people from such varied backgrounds and different levels of class, and like it's insane who you're meeting. And you just every day you're meeting a completely different person, and you go to a different place, so it's cool in that way. It's the best part of the job, I think, is scouting.
Could you talk briefly about what it's like to be a freelancer? So how do you manage that in your day-to-day life, and managing your year? And
it's very hard. It's probably my least favorite part about the job is being freelance. It's very difficult to manage being a freelancer, and it can become quite diplomatic, and maybe the word, because you were on a job and I remember when I left your job early because I got a job as assistant location manager, and then you got to it's having those conversations, and it can be quite difficult because ultimately you need to think about what you're doing for your career, but also you don't want to make a negative impact on the people that you've been working with. And so it can get quite difficult to manage your own diary because like things end up clashing, or a lot of we've seen this year is you're scheduled to start a job and it's got pushed. And so you kind of have to gamble whether you're going to be turning down work because you're scheduled to start on something, but then you've got no contract yet, so that can still be pushed. So it's can be very difficult to manage, especially when the climate is as it is now, because this all the work is quite there's not any structure to the work coming in at the moment. It's all kind of in big lumps and drabs, and so you kind of trying to manage when you're free and when you're not free, and you can't ever book holiday because every time you book holiday you end up having to work.
That's when the work comes in. Yeah.
Every time.
And then if you do go on the holiday, you feel doubly annoyed because you've spent the money on holiday and you didn't earn what is quite a lucrative salary if you had been working.
And it's also, if you're on a job and you do go on holiday, I went on holiday last year while I was on a job, and I was up every day at 4:00 in the morning to do meetings and calls with the production, just because when each member of a team, especially when you go to more of like a assistant location manager or coordinator or location manager or supervisor location manager, your knowledge can't really be replaced that easily. So taking 2 weeks off, you can't quite just get someone in to fill you for 2 weeks because they haven't been there for the whole time. So you can't just be like, I'm going off for 2 weeks, bye, don't call me, and I'm not going to speak to anyone for 2 weeks, because you're leaving the job in a bad situation by doing that.
So were you paid for that?
No.
So you took 2 weeks unpaid to still do a little bit of work just in a different location?
Yeah, because I don't want to leave my team in the lurch. Like, it's not fair. I booked the holiday and they they didn't have to agree to me going on the holiday. They could have just hired someone else. So in that case, I'm obviously going to still make sure that my locations and the work is still going to schedule and everything's okay back in the UK, because it's not fair on the rest of the team to be picking up the work that I should have been doing if I was there, because it's just we're a team in the end of the day. We're here for each other.
And what is the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
To never get too stressed and always think that there's way worse things that can happen. We're not saving lives, we're just making TV.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's no one who is super experienced in the industry who I don't just admire the hell out of, who hasn't got that perspective of, as long as no one gets hurt, it's only
Yeah.
film and television.
Yeah, and if you're getting super tired, go to sleep, don't drive. Like don't we start over panicking on things, because yes, there's a high pressure in this industry and it is intense, but you sometimes just need to take a breath and then move forward, because otherwise you do end up injuring yourself, or people get, like, you see some people, art department will end up hammering their nails because they're just getting so tired. But you just need to think that we are just making TV. It's that at the end of the day, it's going to be fine. We will get there, but you don't need to hurt yourself in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Thank you
Thanks
so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And we'll put some of those groups into the show notes, and
Yeah.
maybe we can also put a sample CV
Yeah.
in the show notes of what a hire might look like, and we'll keep it vague and we won't put the specific details, but so it might be helpful in other departments as well. But for sure, we could.
Yeah, that's a great shout.
As you know, 2 expert location hirers would be
Yes.
really useful. We'll put that in there.
Me and Danny have had discussions on
TVs, yeah.
There we are. So we'll put an example one in
Yeah.
the show notes.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so
Ashleigh.
much.
Thank you.